Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. showed up in Congress today for a censorship hearing, and the Democrats didn't want to hear from him because they don't like things that challenge their worldview. So what did they do right out of the gate? They moved to literally censor him at a censorship hearing. This woman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, moved for the vote. All of the Democrats jumped in on this thing, and then RFK Jr. blasted them, reminded them that this is not what their party is about. He's flanked by Dennis Kucinich there, smiling away the whole time, and he finishes his statement with a beautiful round of applause from the people who recognize the importance of free speech. Maybe the Democrats will realize this at some point, but here it is. In Congress, at a censorship hearing, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. seated right here. We've got Chairman of the Weaponization and Judiciary Committees, Jim Jordan. He's flanked by Stacey Plaskett. We know others like Thomas Massie are in the House. All the Democrats on this side of the panel. Here is what they did at the start of this hearing.
I'd like to raise a point of order.
Gentlelady can state a point of order.
Point of order pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, which Mr. Kennedy is violative of. I move that we remove into executive session because Mr. Kennedy has repeatedly made despicable anti-Semitic and anti-Asian comments as recently as last week. Rule 11, Clause 2.
Despicable comments. Now, they're trying to move this into executive session. They want to close this off from the public proceeding. And this feels very convenient because isn't one of their constituents, one of their members in Congress, under a lot of fire for saying some pretty awful things about other people around this world?
2 says, whenever it is asserted by a member of the committee that the evidence or testimony at a hearing may tend to defame, degrade, or incriminate any person, or it is asserted by a witness that the evidence or testimony that the witness would give at a hearing may tend to defame, degrade, or incriminate the witness, and it goes on. Mr. Kennedy, among many other things, has said, I know a lot now about bioweapons. We put out hundreds of millions of dollars into ethnically targeted microbes. The Chinese have done the same thing. In fact, COVID-19, there is an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately. The races that are most immune to COVID-19 are...
Gentlelady making a motion or a speech?
I've made a motion to move into executive session because Mr. Kennedy's testimony...
Mr. Chairman, I move to table the motion.
Statements...
And we're pausing for our YouTube medical censors out there. This is not medical advice. This is a debate about what Robert F. Kennedy said, and she's saying that this was a racist statement, essentially, that this was disproportionately impacting different demographics, and that it was offensive, and that now Kennedy is going to be coming out here and violating House rules by having made that statement. He hasn't even testified yet. He's not made any statement like this in Congress, but they're saying that he said something like that. She kind of cobbled together his words, and he'll explain it, saying that it's been taken out of context. But they are now trying to shut him up now, silence him.
The gentleman from Kentucky has moved to table.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a roll call vote on the motion to table.
Every Democrat's going to vote
questions
yes.
on the motion to table. The gentlelady has asked for a roll call vote. The clerk will have to step back for a second. The clerk will have to come in. We'll call the roll on the motion to table, and then we can get back to testimony.
I think the witnesses can sit in the chairs sitting behind.
I'll leave that up to the clerks. If the clerks are comfortable with that, why don't we do that? Maybe we can go right down here.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Gentleman from Louisiana.
Is it the custom of this committee to censor viewpoints that we disagree with from witnesses?
Mr. Chairman, I have
not a point of
I have
order.
a motion on the table.
There's a motion and the vote's been
Move
called.
into executive session.
We're waiting
because
for, we're waiting for
Kennedy
the clerks.
Is violative of Rule 11, Clause 2.
Waiting for the clerks. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Issa? Mr. Massey?
Yes, to not censor.
Mr. Massey votes
Shout
yes.
out to Massey.
Mr. Stewart? Yes. Mr. Stewart votes yes. Ms. Stefanik?
Yes.
Ms. Stefanik votes yes. Mr. Gates?
Somebody
Mr.
get
Johnson
Matt
of
Gates.
Louisiana?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes yes. Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong votes yes. Mr. Stube? Mr. Bishop? Yes. Mr. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Kamak?
Yes.
Ms. Kamak votes yes. Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes yes. Ms. Plaskett?
No, I want to follow the rules that the Republicans made at the beginning of this conference with
Democrats
these House
now.
rules, so no.
Ms. Plaskett votes no. Mr. Lynch? No. Mr. Lynch votes no. Ms. Sanchez?
No, because it's violative of the rules.
Ms. Sanchez votes no.
Censor.
Ms. Wasserman Schultz?
No to allowing a witness to
Censor.
degrade and
This is not
defame
speech
others
time.
and violate the rules.
We got your vote.
And not have his
Pipe down,
testimony
Debbie.
and degradation amplified
Mr. Chair.
rather
Just
than
say no.
given an executive session.
Ms. Wasserman Schultz
Gosh.
votes no.
Censor.
Mr. Connolly?
Censor.
No to the
Miss-
Soviet Politburo.
Censor.
Mr. Connolly votes no. Mr. Garamendi?
No.
Mr. Garamendi
Censor.
votes no. Mr. Allred? Ms. Garcia?
No.
Ms. Garcia votes
Censor.
no. Mr. Goldman?
Goldman.
No to hate speech.
Mr. Goldman
Censor.
votes no.
You're hateful. All right, so back over to the Republicans.
Mr. Gates.
Gates is
Mr.
here.
Gates? Mr. Gates votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 8 noes.
The motion to table is agreed to.
Motion to table is agreed to. Your stupid censor motion fails. You don't control the votes, even though you're trying to censor people. Not in this house. You might still control YouTube and Facebook and some of the other platforms, but not here. Now, Robert Kennedy is going to respond to all this here in a minute, but I wanted to play this other clip from Stacey Plaskett, just so we can understand where these people are coming from and how almost demented they are. This is a hearing about speech in America, about free speech. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a Democrat, been a lifelong Democrat, has a ton of Democratic positions that I think are in total alignment with the Democratic Party. A lot of them are not, because their ideology has gotten so far askew from where it used to be. But he is on their team, technically. He's running for their party. And he's only here to talk about speech, to say that he was censored when he was sharing his perspective. Has nothing to do with Donald Trump at all. He was talking about pandemic stuff and other issues. But watch where this goes immediately from Stacey Plaskett.
Mr. Kennedy's and others here are claiming that they've been censored, but they
They were.
actually have a huge megaphone.
They have been censored. They were suppressed off YouTube, thrown off different platforms. Hello?
The rules that my colleague tried to bring up were rules that the Republicans made at the beginning of this Congress. They did not allow the Democrats to be part of that. And one of those rules was that if information or testimony might potentially defame an individual, that we would go in executive session.
What is going
No
to be
one was trying to
defamatory?
stop him from testifying, but not to give him the megaphone that this group has allowed him to have. I also note, in terms of censorship, that the far-right media has already issued articles about me playing the race card.
Well,
The race card
stop.
is something that's often used against Black people for bringing up when they see race hatred being propagated against them. And it's a
What?
means to try and keep us quiet and keep us in our place. Oh, you're playing the race card by bringing up what is obvious in our lives, what is obviously happening, race. And so
it's
you keep
racist.
saying I'm race baiting and try and censor me, but I'm going to continue to tell the truth.
Oh, wow.
I want to be a
Yeah, you racist bigots. So how dare you even say, first of all, if you voted against her vote, you're a racist. And if you don't support her censoring this guy, you're a bigot. And she's going to bring it up. And if you even challenge her about it, you're racist for that too. So just get used to it. No matter what happens, every morning, look at yourself in the mirror and just remind yourself you're a racist bigot. That's what I do.
abundantly clear about what else is happening in this room. The MAGA Republicans are trying to scare social media companies into not taking down blatantly false information in the lead up to our 2024 presidential election. Chair Jordan knows, as we do, that when conspiracy theories succeed, so does Donald Trump.
Whoa, man, she's amazing. All right, so it's hard to imagine that there is it's almost like a character like you'd write in a terrible Netflix series or something. It's just outstanding. She's there screaming about racism and about, I don't even know what, in a censorship hearing where she's moving to support censorship of a Democrat in her own committee. This is, my friends, is when I talk about these people are going to fail, this is what I'm talking about, okay? I don't know how they're going to get anything done if this is how they operate all the time. It's just nuts. And here we have a reasonable Democrat, which I know is an oxymoron these days, but it's true. He is flanked here by Dennis Kucinich, who turned out to be one of the best prognosticators of a lot of things in quite some time, is here. The normal Democrats are back in Congress, and he delivers a burner reminding us why free speech is so dang important.
I want to put aside my written statement for a moment.
Dump it aside. Get
and
rid of
address one of the points that was brought up, I think an important point by the ranking member, that this body ought to be concerning itself with with issues that impact directly the American people. The rising price of groceries, 76% over the past 2 years for basic foodstuff, the war in Ukraine, the inflation issues, the border issues, many, many other issues that concern us all as a nation. We can't do that without the First Amendment, without debate. When I gave my speech, my announcement speech in Boston 2 months ago, YouTube, I talked about all those issues. I focused on grocery. I focused on the fact that working class people can no longer afford to live in this country. I talked about inflation, all the issues that deeply concern you, and that you've devoted your career to alleviating those issues.
Looking at the Democrats.
5 minutes into my speech, when I was talking about Paul Revere, YouTube deplatformed me.
Nice.
I didn't talk about vaccines in that speech. I didn't talk about anything that was a verboten subject. I just was talking about my campaign and things, the conversation that we ought to be having with each other as Americans. But I was shut down, and that is why the First Amendment's important. Debate, congenial, respectful debate is the fertilizer, it's the water, it's the sunlight for our democracy.
Absolutely.
We need
essential.
to be talking to each other.
First Amendment.
This is a letter that many of you signed, many of my fellow Democrats. I've spent my life in this party. I've devoted my life to the values of this party. 102 people signed this.
Idiots.
This itself is evidence of the problem that this hearing was convened to address. This is an attempt to censor a censorship hearing. The
102
charges
people signed the document.
And by the way, censorship is antithetical to our party. It was appalling to my father, to my uncle, to FDR, Harry Truman, to Thomas Jefferson, as the chairman referred to. It is the basis for democracy. It sets us apart from all of the previous forms of government. We need to be able to talk, and the First Amendment was not written for easy speech. It was written for the speech that nobody likes you for.
So the Democrats go, they get 102 people who are offended by something. They draft a letter. They're going to shove it in front of his face. And they're going to say, you can't talk about this because 102 colleagues say you're a racist or something like that. They always do this with their stupid letters. They did this with their 51 so-called intelligence experts that told us that we couldn't talk about the Hunter Biden laptop. They try it all the time. It's not working anymore.
And I was censored not just by the Democratic administration. I was censored by the Trump administration.
All censorship.
I was the first person censored by as the chairman pointed out, by the Biden administration 2 days after it came into office. It ordered a truthful, and by the way, they had to invent a new word called malinformation to censor people like me.
Yeah,
There was no misinformation on my Instagram account. Everything I put on that account was cited and sourced to peer-reviewed publications or government databases. Nobody has ever pointed to a single piece of misinformation that I publish. I was removed for something they called malinformation. Malinformation is information that is true, but is inconvenient to the government, that they don't want people to hear. And that's antithetical to the values of our country. After I announced my presidency, it became more difficult for people to censor me outright. So now I'm subject to this new form of censorship, which is called targeted propaganda, where people apply pejoratives like anti-vax. I've never been anti-vaccine, but everybody in this room probably believes that I have been, because that's the prevailing narrative.
That's the sphere. They label him that way.
Anti-Semitism, racism, these are the most appalling, disgusting pejoratives.
Weapons of
and
the
they're
left.
applied to me to silence me.
Racist,
Because
bigot.
people don't want me to have that conversation about the war, about groceries, about inflation,
Marginalize
about
your
the
enemies.
war on the middle class in this country that we need to be having. And by the way, I want to say this while I'm on the record, that in my entire life, and why I'm under oath, in my entire life, I have never uttered a phrase that was either racist or anti-Semitic. I have spent my life fighting my professional career, fighting for Israel, for the protection of Israel. I have a better record on Israel than anybody in this chamber today. I'm the only person who has publicly objected to the $2 billion payout that the Biden administration is now making to Iran, which is a genocidal program. I'm the only one who's objected to that. I fought more ferociously for Israel than anybody. But I am being censored here through this target, through smears, through misinterpretations of what I've said, through lies, through association, which is a tactic that we all thought we had been discredited and dispensed with after the Army McCarthy hearings in the 1950s.
No, it's live
but
and well.
those same weapons are now being deployed against me to silence me.
A fellow Democrat.
I know many of the people who wrote this letter.
Garbage letter.
I don't believe there's a single person who signed this letter who believes I'm anti-Semitic.
Right on.
I do not believe that. There is no evidence of that. Now, I want to say something I think that's more important, and it goes directly to what you talked about, ranking member. which is the need, this toxic polarization that is destroying our country today. And how do we deal with that? This kind of division is more dangerous for our country than any time since the American Civil War. And how do we deal with that? How are we going to, every Democrat on this committee believes that we need to end that polarization. Do you think you can do that by censoring people? I'm telling you, you cannot. That only aggravates and amplifies the problem.
I think he's being very generous to his fellow side. I don't think they have any interest in unity or stopping this division in a minute. I think that they want total victory. They want total subjugation. It's their way or the highway. There's no unity. There's no room for people with opposing viewpoints. It's blood sport now. So I really appreciate this faith that they're operating that way in good faith, but I think that is incorrect. I think Kucinich thought that way. I think Kennedy's an old school Democrat who thinks that way. But AOC, Stacey Plaskett, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, these people have a bloodthirst for total power. They don't want any unity and split votes. Well, let's compromise with the Republicans. No, they'd rather them all thrown in the gulags in DC.
We need to start being kind to each other. We need to start being respectful to each other.
That is true.
We need to start restoring the comedy to this chamber and to the rest of America, but it has to start here. My uncle, Edward Kennedy, has more legislation with his name on it than any senator in United States history. Why is that? Because he was able to reach across the aisle, because he didn't deal in insults, because he didn't try to censor people. He brought home people who were antithetical to what he believed in. He came home almost every weekend with people like Orrin Hatch to our house at the compound in Hyannisport. At that time, Orrin Hatch to me was like Darth Vader, because I was an environmentalist. And I was saying, why is Teddy bringing this guy home? But he knew that he was effective because he understood that comedy and respect and kindness and compassion and empathy for other people is the only way to restore the function in this chamber. But more importantly, today we need to give an example in the leadership of our country of being respectful to each other. If you think I said something that's anti-Semitic, let's talk about the details. I'm telling you, all the things that I'm accused of right now by you, and in this letter are distortions, they're misrepresentations. I didn't say those things.
And she has him right in front of the whole world to see the opportunity to call him out on every one of those statements. She could say she's on Congress. She's right up there on a very tight little podium up there to make her feel up high up there. All powerful. Hey, Mr. Kennedy, I saw that you said these racist things. Why are you a racist? Would be a great question. And he could respond to that. But she's not interested in that. She'd rather him just be silenced so that she can sit up there on her podium and call him a racist without him being able to respond. She doesn't want a conversation. She wants a bullhorn.
There's fragments that I said, but I denounce anybody who uses the words that I have said to imply something that is negative about people who are Jewish. I never said those things. And I want to point out also that the chairman pointed to Dennis Kucinich, who's fighting behind me. There is no two people in the country who feel more differently about American politics than these two people. And yet they were friends. Dennis attended his children's basketball games, attended his daughter's wedding. This is what we need, how we need to start treating each other in this country. We have to stop trying to destroy each other, to marginalize, to vilify, to gaslight each other.
To prosecute.
We have to find that place inside of ourselves of light, of empathy, of compassion, and above all, we need to elevate the Constitution of the United States, which was written for hard times, and that has to be the premier compass for all of our activities. Thank you very much.
Right on.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to raise a point of order.
So I think somebody chimed in there and said, can we shut him up, please? I think he went over time or something like that. So they kept trying to censor him throughout the remainder of the proceeding, and belittle him and castigate him for being a racist bigot and all the things, even though he's not. You have the opportunity to speak in this country, guaranteed by the First Amendment. The Democrats hate that. They want to censor even their own party when there's a little bit of unorthodoxy thinking that occurs there. So shout out to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for his impassioned speech on free speech, the most important issue of our time, the thing that they're trying to take away from us, which means everything else follows. If we can't speak about reality, if we can't manifest our humanity through our thinking and speaking, we're slaves. And we don't want to exist in that world. Democrats love to censor their opponents. We hope that good Democrats in the Democratic Party rally around Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and he sets their party back on track.